All right. Good morning, everybody. Great to see you today. My name is Mike La Charite. I'm a gold consultant with Team Sky, and really excited to have you here today. We are going to be talking about group bookings. This is something that I did in a past life. It was kind of my bread and butter for a bit, and it's actually a really good piece of business that I think a lot of travel agents overlook. So I'm planning today to just do kind of a one-on-one overview of several different facets and kind of the process of doing a group booking. And you'll see throughout the recording, I've done some more specific trainings in on this subject, and so I've linked those. Feel free to take screenshots or write down the links, and you can visit those later for kind of some more in-depth knowledge. But let's get into it and get started. So the first question is, what is a group? And generally for hotel business, groups are defined as at least 10 rooms per night. Anything under that is going to be transient business. Now for cruises, most of the cruise lines will start a group at about 8 cabins. So that's a slight difference, but most of what we talk about today is going to be land-based groups, and then we'll get into cruises just a little bit at the end. Okay. Um, Groups also tend to be from 4 different categories. That's kind of how we separate them out. And so they're either corporate, association, nonprofit, or SMERF. And SMERF is kind of your catch-all for social, military, government, educational, religious, fraternal. Sporting events would fit in there as well, marathons, that kind of thing. So those are kind of the 4 different buckets. And a lot of hotels and convention and visitors bureaus are going to have different people help you depending on which market you're in. So it's important at the beginning as you're starting to work with groups, kind of figure out where they fit and also where you want to specialize. So why do we book groups, and why do I think this is something that more travel agents should focus on? Well, first of all, it's higher commissions because you're doing a little extra work, but generally you're booking a lot more people at once. And instead of booking one hotel room, you're booking 10, 50, 2,000, depending on the size of your group, right? So a lot more commission opportunity. They're also a great referral source for additional business, especially for those of us who are travel agents and we're doing corporate, but we're also doing personal travel. Every single person that comes to a group event is now a potential client for you. So that's a great opportunity. And also, they're generally very stable and predictable. Most group business from companies or marathons, they're going to happen once and then they're going to happen again. They're going to be quarterly, annually, depending on what type of event it is. So once you plan it with the client once and you get to know them, they get to know you. It's really just wash your hands, rinse and repeat, which makes it much, much easier going down the road. And generally, there's some great longevity here. So you have commissions coming in over a greater period of time. You also have opportunities with some of the bigger clients to do multi-year deals. So you might do a contract once and contract their meetings for the next 3 to 5 years. So again, less work, more money. And you have the opportunity to really help the client in that case. Okay. Where to find groups. So a lot of us are very familiar with kind of personal and transient travel. But groups are all over the place, and they could be, as you saw in the markets, they can be just about anything. So going to large companies, especially companies with like a sales force, oftentimes they're going to be doing sales meetings for their departments. They're going to even potentially have incentive travel groups where they'll take their top sales agents on a trip as a kind of bonus for being their top agents. Also, large families that are spread out over a wide geographic area, family reunions are huge. And again, they happen often annually. School groups that are doing, reunions. Looking in your professional network, because I guarantee you, if you look through your LinkedIn contacts, at least 20 to 30%, if not a lot more than that, are going to group meetings every year as part of their continuing education, networking, all of those things. And then Google and internet sources, there's a lot of ways that you can find groups just by searching, online. So I actually did a training on that. specifically using Google to find groups with some different search strings and kind of unique search parameters. So if you go to traveltogetheragain.net/finding groups, feel free to screenshot that. You can watch my training on finding groups there. Bridget asked, how do you initiate that conversation with large companies? How do you find these clients? So as far as finding them, um, literally, I would start online and look in your local area, right? And start there. Try to figure out what big companies are out there. If you watch that other training, I show you how to do some searches for RFPs that are getting posted online and how to find some of those clients in your area. But really, start with the businesses that you know or that you work with, right? And then kind of spread out a little bit more and look at others in your area that have a sales team, that have a finance department, because they're each of those departments is an opportunity for meetings. And as far as initiating the conversation, this is one of those areas where, as most of us for travel are not doing a lot of cold calling, but it's just reaching out and generally finding the marketing department or HR. Those are going to kind of be the departments that are starting to, they'll get you to the right place. Also, go through LinkedIn, look at your contacts, and search the various companies and see who you might have in common with them. I have been shocked before by some big companies that I've wanted to prospect, and I've gone and searched on LinkedIn and found out that I had a common connection with somebody that worked at that company. So I was able to reach out to my friend on LinkedIn and say, hey, could you put me in touch with this person? So that's a great strategy. Use LinkedIn, especially for business groups, because there's 6 degrees of separation is real. And I think it sometimes is really surprising who we know. So, all right. So this is kind of the general process for doing group business. Okay, you're going to do your intake once you have a client. Okay, I'm not talking about the sales and marketing. Once you have somebody who wants you to book their group, you're going to do an intake and get your information. Much like we have either a Jot form or a Google form for our travel clients, I would have a specific one that is for group business, that is asking more group pointed questions. Okay, and you send that form and get them to fill it out so you get all of the information. That does two things. It gets you the info in a nice, concise, easy to manage sort of place, and it gets you what you need because you've set up the form. But I've also noticed that it does a lot for trust with the clients. When they see my questionnaire that's asking like 30 questions about different, parts of their business, and it's things that maybe they haven't even thought of, it really shows that I'm the expert. And I've had multiple clients tell me like, wow, after I read all the questions that you were asking, like I could tell you really know what you're talking about. So put together a comprehensive form. I think it's really, really useful. Once you get their information, based on your conversations, it's identifying the host cities and the properties where that would be a good fit for this event. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay. Then we would source the proposals. We would get those approved by the client. Once you have an approved proposal, you're going to negotiate a contract with the hotel. Now, once that contract is negotiated and it's ready to send to the client, you want to send that to Archer. Jose or Susie have to approve that before it goes out. They want to make sure the commission language is in there. They want to make sure that all the basic protections are in there. And so that is a mandatory step before the client sees the contract. Archer has to approve it. Okay. And I'll tell you where to send it a little bit later in the training. Once they approve it, you send it to the client, you get it all signed. Once it's duly signed, there's usually a deposit the client will pay, and at that point, the event's confirmed. Then, much like our travel clients, we're going to be doing some work with the hotel to fulfill the event. We'll talk about that. And at the end of it, again, rinse and repeat, right? Figure out what went well and do it again the next year. And you have all the information already. So that's the general process for group booking. Okay. I want to go over some important terms here. because the language is a little bit different for some of these uh, bookings than what we're used to with just kind of our normal transient, consumer travel. So the first word that you may or may not have heard is attrition. And attrition is the difference between your guaranteed hotel block numbers and your actual booked numbers. So when you do a contract with a hotel, you are telling them, I'm guaranteeing that I'm going to take X amount of rooms. But there's usually an attrition percentage that allows you to give up some of those rooms without penalty. So, for example, if I contract 100 room nights, but I only filled 80, that means I have 20% attrition. Generally, around 20% allowed attrition is the standard. Sometimes, hotels will usually try to negotiate at 10. I always try to get them to 20 if I can. Every once in a while, it'll go more than that if it's a really big group. But so that's a super key fact in your group contract. One of the most important things because that's where your client's liability is. Okay. Cumulative attrition is calculated based on the total room nights. So again, where I said I have 100 room nights and I only filled 80, there's the 20%. Daily attrition is calculated per night. So if I have 100 room nights over 5 nights, that's 20 per night, right? That means I have to hit that 80% every one of those 5 nights versus in a cumulative situation, as long as it averages out, it's fine. If I get more on one night but less on another night, as long as the average hits that 80%, it's good. Okay. So it's important to know the difference and know what's actually being charged or what's actually being put in the contract. A courtesy block, these happen a lot of times for small weddings, or if you're just doing something really small and you don't want to guarantee because you don't maybe know how many rooms are gonna actually book. So they'll do a room block called a courtesy block that's held without any attrition penalties. Generally, this does not go above 10 rooms on peak. Once you do 10 rooms, they or more, they want you to sign a contract. You have to be careful here because sometimes if you don't fill those 10 rooms, yes, they'll release the rooms without penalty, but you may also lose some of the concessions or things that you've negotiated because now it's technically not considered a group if there's not 10 rooms, right? But these can be useful for small events. Cutoff date, that's an agreed upon date at which time the hotel will release any unreserved rooms in the room block to be sold through the hotel's normal sales channels. Generally, you're 30 to 60 days in advance. Sometimes you can get 2 weeks. But if I've booked 100 rooms and I've only filled, 50 of them, at the cutoff date, they're going to release the rest and try to sell them. So the hotel's not out money. Okay. Concessions are special deals, typically discounts or complimentary services that the hotel includes in the contract. These are like your group amenities, right? So things like waived parking, comp Wi-Fi, suite upgrades, food and beverage discounts, amenities for your VIPs. So these are some of the things that if you don't hit your numbers, they may take some of these things away, but they're ways to negotiate extras for your client based on the size of the group that you have. Okay. The RFP is the request for proposal. That is the summary of all the important information about the event needs. And that's what the hotel uses to prepare its proposal. So it includes things like how many sleeping rooms you need, what meeting space you need, the dates, or if there's flexibility on the dates, requested concessions, any information about the event itself. You're going to prepare that request for proposal. You're going to give that to the hotels, and that's what they're going to use to put together their proposal for you. Okay. Room nights are the total number of sleeping rooms in the contract, or sleeping room nights in the contract. So if we have 10 rooms for 4 nights, that's 40 room nights total. Okay. Peak nights or rooms on peak would be the nights with the highest number of reserved rooms. So if you've contracted 10 rooms on Monday and Friday and 20 rooms on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are your peak nights, and you have 20 rooms on peak. Okay. So that's a good one to know as well. We're almost done with the terms here. I know this is kind of dry. Okay. So, talked about some of the information that you need to know. Once you get your client's information, we need to find the right host. And generally the destination is going to be the first thing that you want to look at, right? So these are some of the important factors that I consider that you want to talk over with your client, and that you, as the event, planner, the travel planner, the person sourcing this deal, you're going to be able to make recommendations based on what you know about different destinations. So the probably number one thing here, I didn't really put these in any particular order, would be the lift, air access, and really the kind of regionality of the event. I should have added that. So if you're doing an event for California people, for Southern Californians, and they want to stay, everybody wants to drive in, that's going to tell you you need to get a venue somewhere that's in a reasonable driving distance for them, right? So kind of figuring out what region people are in, and if they are a group that likes to travel and wants to go to a different destination, looking at the air access and the lift, how many flights come in, what airlines go there. Obviously, the more lift, the more access, the easier it is for people to get there and the less money they have to spend. So that's an important thing to figure out from the client. Do you want to travel? Do you want to go far? Do you want to stay close? Where are your people coming from? All of those sort of things. Okay. Weather and seasonality, obviously super important. Some groups are not going to want to go to Denver in January and meet in 8 feet of snow. Other groups are not going to want to be in Florida in the summer and deal with humidity and bugs the size of tennis balls. So that's a huge part of it. And also that a lot of times has um, a big impact on the rates that they're going to get. So you can go to New Orleans in August and it is super hot and humid and horrible, but you can stay at the Ritz-Carlton for $120 a night. And for some groups that might be worth it. They want the destination, they want the budget, that's really important, and they want a nice hotel. So that seasonality can really impact the rates. Their budget, of course, if they have a low budget, I'm not taking them to Nashville or New York City, where I was just in Nashville for an event and the hotels were $300 to $400 a night. So that's super important. The event size, do they have the facilities? If they are a convention for 20,000 people, I may not take them to Lubbock, Texas, or, something like that. So making sure that the facilities are what you need. If it's a big event, the convention center, making sure there's enough hotels around to sleep all of your people, that they're potentially close enough to walk to, or if you need shuttles set up, all of that kind of goes into that event size. Safety, of course, can be a big deal for people. Most event hosts are going to say that's one of their most important things. Obviously, I've done meetings everywhere. I lived in Baltimore for 4 years, which is one of the quote unquote most unsafe cities in the world. And we loved it. So, this is something just to talk to your client about and figure out what their tolerance for risk is. Do they want to be downtown? Do they want to be in a suburb? What are they looking for? I debated on whether to add this, but I think it is important for some groups, city politics or state politics. So if you have a group, say, that is anti-marijuana and it's a group all about stopping people from smoking pot, you're not going to take them to Denver or Portland, or right? So sometimes those social issues or those political issues, while we don't want to make that a big thing, sometimes they do have an impact based on the groups that we have if they're a specialty group. So paying attention to that can be important depending on who you're working with. And then the last thing I added here would be things to do. Most events that travel, the people are not going to want to just sit in a meeting room all day. And usually they're going to a destination because they want to experience what's in that destination. So when you're talking to a client and putting a proposal together, having an idea of, oh, they can go from the hotel, they can do a food tour, there's X amount of breweries, there's tours out into the desert, just kind of some of those activities that can make a difference for people as well. Okay, so there's a lot of factors into finding the right place for the event. Sometimes the clients are already going to have that and they're going to tell you, hey, we've met in this city, this city, and this city, and it's gone really, really well. We want to go back to those. But sometimes you are in the unique place of being able to suggest these to people. Okay. All right. So we have qualified our client. We've gotten their information. We've figured out where we're going to go. Now we need to start getting some proposals. So step one is going to be creating your request for proposal. I recommend using a software to do this called Cvent, and you'll see it's at the bottom. It's free to use. It automates the sourcing process. And I have a training that I did on using Cvent. If you go to traveltogetheragain.net/Cvent, it's a really, really useful tool. And what it lets you do is basically compare hotels in a given place, shows you all their stats, their meeting room size, and you can actually send out you create the request for proposal in Cvent. You send it out to the hotels, they send you their quotes right through the program, so you can get them side by side. And it's really, really useful. So I recommend that. Also, not sure if you guys have ever heard of a convention and visitors bureau. Almost every city is going to have one, or a visitor center, something like that. These guys are your friends, okay? They know their city better than you do, most likely, unless you live there. And they have member hotels and activity suppliers and restaurants. And they know so much about their city. They are great allies, and they love helping meeting planners. Their goal is to get people to come to their city, right? And so they will give you sometimes inside information. They'll have access to sort of special things, what's coming up, what events are happening here, what time of year should we do this if we want to come to your city. They're going to know all of that way faster than you. So in Cvent, I almost always copy the local convention and visitors bureau on my request for proposal, and then they will often suggest other hotels, or they'll get in touch with me and give me suggestions. Sometimes they even have some really cool promotional material, or they'll have little like kind of tchotchkes, or I've had CVBs give me luggage tags to give to all of the attendees. So just a little free kind of add-on stuff for your clients. So definitely rely on your CVBs. They are super important. I also like to say, be realistic with your requests. Okay. I have one client, I love them to death, but man, they source a 20 or 30 room meeting and they think they should be able to get the sky, the moon, and the stars. And that's just not going to happen. Right. You have to be realistic with your proposal, with your hotel. If you've got 20 rooms, that you're reserving, don't ask for 10 free rooms. They're not going to give you that. That just a is going to annoy them, and it's going to make you look as someone who's maybe a little more ignorant, or not. It makes it look like you're not really thinking about what you're asking for, right? And so try to keep your clients on the realistic basis. That doesn't mean you can't ask for more than you think you'll get, but keep it within reason. Okay. I think that is a super important point that a lot of people miss. All right. So now you've sent out your proposal or your RFP, you've gotten a bunch of proposals back. You've gone back and forth with the client, and they've said, okay, here's the hotel I want to go with. So now you go back to the hotel and you tell the hotel to originate the contract. They're going to create it, they're going to send it to you to review. You go back and forth, figure out the clauses that you want, make changes. And once it's done, that needs to go to Archer for approval. So I have another training all about hotel contracts. I talk about a lot of the different clauses, some more terms that you need to know, and just different clauses that I recommend, negotiating in there, or at least looking for. So if you go to traveltogetheragain.net/group contracts, you can see that video, and that one's the slog, and there's a lot of information. Again, I'm not I'm not an attorney, so that's just my experience. Consult your own attorney, but definitely Archer needs to be included in this process. They need to approve it before you send it to the client. Okay. You can just send it to groupcontracts@archertravel.com. Jose has always gone back to me same day or next day on that. So it's really easy. An important point here: never, ever, 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 ever sign a contract for the client. You don't want your name on there in case something goes wrong. And for example, they don't get enough rooms. They need to sign it themselves because they are taking that responsibility. Okay, so don't ever, ever sign a contract on behalf of a client, even if they ask you to. Say, no, this is something you need to sign because the agreement is not with you, it's between the client and the venue. Okay. All right. Once the contract is signed, you get it back. You make sure the hotel signs it too, so you have a duly signed copy. And then it's just a matter of filling out your commission tracking form. Don't forget to do that. I know a lot of agents, I was talking to Jose about this. A lot of agents that do group business get their contract and they totally forget to fill out the commission tracking form. Archer is going to have no idea to go get your commission if that happens. Okay. So make sure you fill it out. If something changes, if your room block changes, you can always update it later. Super important. Okay. Also, make sure the client pays the deposit. Sometimes in the transition, there's a handoff between you as the main representative of the client with the hotel. And then once the contract's signed, sometimes the client becomes that main representative, or they may have a meeting planner that becomes that main representative. Work with the hotel, work with that client, make sure the deposit gets paid. I've seen that get missed so many times. And then the hotel's like, well, we don't have a contract because you signed the contract, but you didn't pay the deposit, so we're canceling the event. You don't want that to happen. Okay. You also at this point want to determine what support the client has and what they need from you. So much like we follow up with our transient clients, through the trip process and make sure they have what they need and check in and all of that, there are things that have to be done for a group. And we'll talk about that. But you need to find out from the client, do they have somebody that does that? Do they have a meeting planner? Are they expecting to do that? Or are they expecting you to do that? And it's totally something you can do. It's very easy, but you may want to charge a fee if it's going above and beyond kind of normal or what you feel is reasonable for the contract. Okay. So when I talk about what is your role, many group clients, especially corporate, association, or nonprofit, they have a meeting planner. This is a lot less likely with family and affinity groups. So if they're expecting you to regularly interface with a client until the event happens, I would consider doing a customer service agreement and charging some sort of a fee, even if it's a couple $100 for your time. They're going to expect you to reach out to the hotel and check on pickup, which means how the room block is filling up. So if you're expected to do that regularly, sometimes if it's a long way out, you'll do it, every month or two. And then once it hits 6 months, it'll be every 2 to 4 weeks. And then once it hits 3 months, it's a weekly thing. And, so on and so on. So if you're expected to do that, you want to make sure you are feeling that you're fairly compensated and the clients understand that. Okay. So we talked about pickup monitoring, as I mentioned, and then if pickup is very short, I'd like to mention this too. It's really important. The reason the pickup monitoring is so important is because I've had situations with clients before where they've found out 5 to 6 months before, man, I was expecting this room block to be 3/4 of the way full by now, and we've only sold 5 rooms, and there's another 30 that we have to sell to get to the attrition baseline, right? So the further out you start to notice these things, the further out you start to see problems, the more likely the hotel is going to be to work with you. Okay. In my experience, hotels want to work with you. They do not want to screw the clients. They don't want the client to have a bad experience, and they don't want the client to have to pay huge penalties. Nobody likes that. It's not good for the hotel. It's not good for the client, and it's not good for the relationship between the two. So generally, the earlier you start seeing a problem, have open dialogue with the hotel. Okay. I've had situations where the pickup's been really short, and I've told the hotel 6 months in advance, and they said, you know what, you're so far in advance, we're going to renegotiate this for you. We're not going to take anything away, but we're going to change the pickup so you're not going to have any penalties. Um, Generally, 90 days is the minimum, because at 90 days, what a lot of hotels are doing is they're meeting with their revenue managers, they're meeting with their ownership, and they're putting together sales projections for the next 90 days. That's going to include your group revenue that's expected to come in. If they've told leadership, hey, we're going to make $50,000 this month, And now you come to them and say, oh, I need to cut my group in half, and that's cutting your revenue by $10,000. That's a big deal. And the hotel, they now have to worry about telling management, oh crap, we let this happen. Now we're going to be short on money. That's not good for them either, right? So at least, like, if you're having pickup issues, try to do it more than 90 days out. I That's kind of a hard cutoff for me. If I see things that are not going well, I'm in the client's ear every day. Hey, we need to do this. We need to talk to the hotel, or you guys are going to have hefty penalties. So that 90-day number is very, very important. Okay. Um, Watch for pirates and rooms outside the block. This is something that has become more common in recent years. And what will happen is room pirates, they call them, will find out that there's a room block that the client has. They will make themselves look like the official booking agency of the event or of the client, and they'll have attendees come and sign up for those rooms. Um, and then at the end of it, they won't actually transmit to the hotel. So the clients may have paid for a room, and then there's no reservation for them. Or they will start selling rooms in the block to other people, and now there's not enough rooms left for the clients, people. So you kind of want to just watch for that. Be tracking the client's registrations versus what's reserved in the hotel. If your client has 10 people registered and there's already 30 rooms in the hotel block reserved, that could be a problem. Talk to the hotel, start to look into that, figure out what's going on. Okay. I also like to keep an eye occasionally on hotel reviews. Make sure there's no new reports of renovations or pests. Every month I'll try to check the hotels and, hey, did something come up? Because if something did, you can talk to management about that. I found before, oh, the hotel didn't tell me there's a renovation happening. That's going to have an impact on my client. So things like that, it can be really helpful to kind of watch ahead of time. Okay. Make sure you're reminding your client as the cutoff day is approaching when the hotel releases the rooms. So if they, need to go out to their attendees and say, look, guys, you only have 2 weeks left, or you're not going to get a room at this rate, they can do that. Okay. Make sure you're being proactive. When you see problems come up, have a solution ready before you call the client. I know we already do this with our travel clients, just as important with group business. Okay. And make sure the client is getting all the appropriate concessions agreed to in the contract. It's not usually malicious, but I have had hotels forget that, hey, we agreed that the power for the exhibit room was going to be free. And now there's a bill that you're charging 10 grand for it. What the heck? So just make sure, like, you did the contract, what's in that contract. Make sure you're monitoring what the client's getting, what they're paying for, and make sure it's accurate. Okay. And then at the end of the event, we do what's called a room block audit. So when you have a group at a hotel, generally they give you a booking code or a booking link. And when somebody uses that link, it reserves the room inside the room block, right? Well, if I'm an attendee of the event, but I don't use that link and I just go direct to the hotel and make my reservation, I'm still staying at the host hotel, but my room is not associated with the group, which means the client isn't going to get credit for it. And towards attrition, it also means you're not going to get paid commission on it because it was made outside the block. So doing a room block audit to find any rooms that are outside the block, basically the client gives you the registration list, and you and the hotel will compare that against the ledger of hotel reservations that they had. And you'll be able to find names that were on the registration list that may have had a room at the hotel but were not in the block. That can get you extra commission. It could be the difference in the client paying an attrition penalty or not. So very important to make sure that audit happens after the event. Okay. Once that's done, you want to update your commission tracking form with the correct number of rooms. That way Archer knows the expected revenue that's accurate. Okay. You want to have a conference call with your client to determine the successes and determine what needs to improve for next year. And then guess what? You can start sourcing the event. Like I said, rinse and repeat. And that's one of the beautiful things about group business is it's like, hey, things went great. We need to change this. Great. I've got you. We're going into the next event right now. So those are a lot of my key points. I do want to talk just briefly about cruises. Next week, I'm doing an entire training on group cruises, and it's going to be comparing the different brands, what options there are, and all of that kind of stuff. So you can check that out. But I do want to suggest this because a lot of companies have not had that thought. They think of the traditional model where we fly to a city, we meet in a hotel, we have a banquet room, this and that. Cruises can be great places for business meetings. Okay. It First of all, you can get free cabins either for yourself or for the planner, for you can give it to your client for retention. They're all inclusive. It's a really unique experience. It's not something that a lot of groups have done. So it can be just really, really creative. And you're taking your people out somewhere. It's kind of like you're combining their business meeting with a vacation, which is awesome. They can bring their families. Um, and that means more commission for you because if they're doing shore excursions, they have family tagging along. That potentially is extra rooms, extra activities, extra drink packages, things that you get commission on. So that can be a big benefit. And with a lot of these, there's actually less risk for the client. Um, Now, depending on how big the event is, you may have to charter the ship, right? So most of the big cruises do groups for 100, 150 people max. But if they're a group bigger than that, you could charter a smaller ship. There's there's more risk there a little bit. But if you're just booking a group of say 30 to 40 cabins on a Royal Caribbean cruise, there is less risk for the client. They're going to put up a deposit per room at that size. But the people can cancel for 3 to 4 months before without any liability. So there's a lot of creative things you can do on the cruise ships. They have a ton of spaces. You can do private receptions. There's different amenities that they give you for the cabins. So check out that training next week. But I just wanted to mention it here because I think it's something that is worth bringing up with your groups. Hey, have you guys ever had this thought? If they're based in Los Angeles, why don't we go do a cruise to Mexico or cruise up the Pacific coast, and now your people don't have to fly, but they can still experience something new. So that is pretty much what I had for you guys today. Let me stop the recording, and then we will get into some Q&A.